October 1347. What would you do if death arrived quietly? No armies, no warning banners, no thunder of hooves, just the sea. Calm, unnaturally calm. The water outside the port of Messina barely moves. No storm, no wind, no omen in the sky. And yet something is wrong. Very wrong. 12 merchant ships appear on the horizon. They had sailed months earlier to the east, to Constantinople, to the Black Sea, to the great trading cities that connected Europe to Asia. They were supposed to return with silk, spices, gold, profit, opportunity. Instead, they return with silence. Why is there no signal fire on deck? Why no sailors waving from the rails? Why do the sails hang loose, as if abandoned? Dock workers gather at the pier. They squint toward the ships, waiting, listening. Nothing. No shouting. No commands. No laughter. Only the hollow sound of wood tapping against the dock. Would you board that ship? Would you be the first to climb that ladder? Someone was. A man steps forward, cautious but curious. He grips the rope, climbs, pulls himself onto the deck, and then he stops, scattered across the planks of bodies. Not arranged, not prepared, just fallen, as if life left the mid-step. Hands still wrapped around rope, fingers frozen in tension, eyes open, staring at nothing, faces twisted in something far worse than fear. Agony. The smell hits next. Rot, decay, and something metallic in the air. Blood. Some of the men are still alive. Barely. They try to speak, but their mouths fill with red. Their breath rattles like broken glass in their lungs. And beneath their arms, along their necks, between their thighs, strange swellings. Black, bulging, painful. What is it? A curse? A poison? A punishment from God? Or something far more terrifying? Something invisible. By sunset, city officials panic. The ships are ordered out of the harbor. Push them away. Send them back to sea. But how do you send away something you cannot see? How do you stop something that is already breathing the same air? That night, fever grips Messina. Strong men collapse in the streets. Children burn with heat. Dark swellings rise under skin like hidden monsters trying to escape. Within days, bodies outnumber coffins. Within weeks, Sicily is drowning in death. Within months, Europe will be unrecognizable. And here's the question that historians still ask. How could 12 ships change the fate of an entire continent? How could a single disease kill nearly half of Europe's population? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if it happened once, could it happen again? This was not just a plague. It was a turning point, a fracture in civilization, a moment when the world as people knew it ended. History would call it many names. The Great Mortality, the Pestilence, the Scourge. But we remember it as the Black Death. Before the plague, Europe was not dying. It was awakening. The 14th century was supposed to be an age of growth. Cities were swelling beyond their medieval walls. Markets were louder than ever. Trade routes stretched like veins across continents. From the ports of Venice and Genoa, to the markets of Paris, to the crowded streets of London, Europe was connected. More connected than it had ever been. Ships moved constantly across the Mediterranean. Caravans crossed deserts carrying silk, spices, and stories. Merchants grew rich. Guilds expanded. Cathedrals rose higher into the sky as if humanity itself was reaching upward. Stone by stone, Europe was building confidence. But beneath that confidence, there were cracks. The population had grown rapidly during the previous centuries. Too rapidly. Fields were overworked. Harvests were becoming less predictable. Just a generation earlier, the Great Famine of 1315 had already weakened millions. People survived it, but barely. And when a society survives hardship, it often forgets how fragile it really is. Cities were crowded, houses packed tightly together. Families shared single-room dwellings. Waste flowed through open streets. Clean water was rare. Rats thrive in the dark spaces beneath floorboards and inside grain stores. And where rats thrive, something else thrives too. But no one could see it. Europe's greatest strength was becoming its greatest weakness. Trade. Every ship that brought silk could also bring something unseen. Every caravan that carried spices could carry something microscopic. Every handshake in a busy marketplace could pass something lethal. But in 1347, no one understood bacteria. No one understood infection. No one understood contagion. If illness struck, it was believed to be bad, a curse, a punishment from God, or alignment of the stars. How do you defend yourself against something you cannot name? How do you fight an enemy you don't even know exists? Europe stood proud. Its churches were powerful. Its kings ambitious. Its people faithful. Yet underneath the noise of prosperity, under the ringing of cathedral bells, under the shouting of merchants, there was vulnerability, invisible, waiting. And when the ships arrived in Messina, they did not arrive to a weak continent. They arrived to a connected one, a network, a living organism. And once the disease entered that organism, it would not move slowly. It would move like blood, from port to port, from city to village, from family to family. And the very systems that made Europe strong would carry the plague faster than any army ever could. This is what makes the Black Death so terrifying. It was not just a disease. It was the consequence of progress, the price of connection, the dark shadow of globalization, centuries before that word even existed. And now, the question was no longer, will it spread? But how foul? How fast? And who will survive? Far from Europe, in the grasslands of Central Asia, a bacterium lives quietly inside wild rodent colonies. Its name, though no one yet knows it, is Yersinia pestis. It does not roar like an army. It does not announce itself like a storm. It waits. It travels inside fleas. Fleas ride rats. Rats ride ships. And ships connect worlds. As Mongol trade routes expand across Eurasia, caravans move westward. Black Sea ports swell with commerce. Italian merchants negotiate profits. In 1346, at the Crimean port of Kaffa, something strange is recorded. A besieging army falls sick. Chroniclers describe corpses hurled over city walls. Whether legend or truth, the result is undeniable. Ships flee Kaffa. Ships carrying infected rats. Ships sailing directly toward Europe. When they dock in Messina, the chain reaction begins. The symptoms are merciless. First, fever, then chills that shake the bones. Pain spreads through the body like fire. Lymph nodes swell into grotesque blackened masses, buboes. Some the size of apples. Victims vomit blood. Dark patches bloom across their skin, internal bleeding surfacing like bruised shadows. Most die within 3 to 5 days. Some die within 24 hours. There are 3 forms of plague: bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic, the most terrifying of all. Because pneumonic plague does not need fleas. It travels in breath. A cough in the market, a whisper in a church, a single exhale can become a death sentence. No one understands why. Doctors burn incense to purify the air. They blame planetary alignment. They blame divine punishment. They blame sin. But the true cause is microscopic and unstoppable. At first, people believed it would pass. A bad season, a cursed month, a punishment that would fade. But it didn't fade. It multiplied. In Florence, carts rolled through the streets at dawn, not selling goods, collecting bodies. In Paris, church bells rang so often for funerals that eventually, they stopped ringing at all. There were too many dead to mourn individually. Too many names to remember. Too many graves to dig. And the worst part, the speed. A man could feel healthy in the morning, strong enough to work, laughing with his children. By evening, fever would take him. By the next sunrise, he was gone. Imagine the terror of that. No warning. No time to prepare. No understanding of why. Dark swellings, buboes, rose beneath the skin. Painful, burning, sometimes the size of an egg, sometimes larger. Victims vomited blood, coughed blood, bled internally as the infection tore through them. And if the disease reached the lungs, it became even more terrifying. Pneumonic plague did not need rats. It did not need fleas. It needed only breath. One cough in a crowded room could become 10 infections. One sick child could mean an entire household dead within days. What do you do when touch becomes dangerous? When love becomes lethal? Parents began abandoning children. Children abandoned parents. Not because they didn't care, but because staying meant dying. Mass graves stretched outside city walls. Long trenches where bodies were stacked like firewood. No ceremonies. No prayers. Just urgency. In some cities, laws broke down entirely. Courts stopped functioning. Markets collapsed. Food rotted in warehouses because there were no workers left to distribute it. Fear changed people. Some turned to faith with desperate intensity. Public processions filled streets. People praying, singing, begging for mercy. Others turned to pleasure. If death is coming, they reasoned, then nothing matters. Drinking, recklessness, violence. When the future disappears, so does restraint. And then came the blame. Whispers spread. It must be poison. It must be witchcraft. It must be outsiders. Jewish communities across parts of Europe were falsely accused of poisoning wells. Entire communities were attacked, burned, massacred. Fear always searches for a face, even when the enemy is invisible. Doctors were powerless. Their treatments ranged from useless to dangerous. Bloodletting, burning herbs, strange masks filled with perfume to block bad air. They did not know about bacteria. They did not know about contagion. They were fighting shadows. In some regions, 30% of the population died. In others, 50%. Imagine your workplace. Half the desks empty. Imagine your neighborhood. Every second house abandoned. Europe did not slowly decline. It fractured. And yet, the plague did not negotiate. It did not choose rich over poor. It did not spare kings. It moved through palaces as easily as it moved through slums. Power meant nothing. Money meant nothing. Status meant nothing. For the first time in centuries, death was the great equalizer. By the time the first wave ended around 1351, an estimated 25 to 50 million people in Europe were dead. Globally, the number may have reached 75 to 100 million. In the 14th century, that was nearly unimaginable. And the survivors? They were not victorious. They were traumatized. A generation grew up surrounded by loss, by silence at dinner tables, by empty fields, by unanswered prayers. The Black Death did not just take lives. It changed how people saw the world. It made death visible, constant, intimate. And once a society has stayed that closely at mortality, it never returns to what it was before. When the dying slowed, there was no celebration, no victory, no relief, only silence. Entire villages stood empty, doors hung open, cooking fires long extinguished. Fields once full of workers were now overgrown. In some regions of Europe, nearly half the population was gone. Imagine your city. Now imagine every second person missing. Neighbors erased. Friends vanished. Families broken beyond repair. Mass graves mark the landscape. Not monuments. Not proper burials. Just trenches. Because there were too many bodies, and not enough hands left to bury them. Priests had died. Doctors had died. Gravediggers had died. In some cities, the living simply dragged the dead into the streets and waited. What does society look like when structure disappears? When authority fails? When faith is shaken? For many, belief collapsed alongside the bodies. If God was protecting them, why had he not stopped it? Others became more devout than ever. Flagellant movements emerged, men whipping themselves in public squares, begging for divine mercy. Blame spread as fast as the disease had. Minorities were accused. Outsiders were attacked. Fear needed a target. And when science does not exist, superstition fills the void. But something unexpected also happened. Survival changed power. With so many dead, labor became scarce. Workers suddenly had value. Peasants could demand higher wages. Serfs began to question lifelong servitude. The rigid structure of feudal Europe began to crack. The Black Death did not just kill people. It disrupted hierarchy. It weakened nobles. It empowered laborers. It accelerated change. Some historians argue that without the plague, the Renaissance may have been delayed, or never happened in the same way. Because when catastrophe clears space, transformation follows. Out of devastation, new thinking grows. Art changes. Economies shift. Medicine slowly evolves. But make no mistake, this rebirth was built on unimaginable loss. Tens of millions dead across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. And yet humanity endured. Bruised. Traumatized. Changed forever. The Black Death ended in waves. But it never truly disappeared. It returned in outbreaks for centuries. Each time reminding humanity, you are not invincible. Today, we understand what medieval Europe could not. The disease was caused by a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas, hosted by rats, spread along trade routes that connected continents. Invisible, microscopic, relentless. And here is the unsettling truth. It still exists. Modern medicine can treat it. Antibiotics can stop it. But the bacterium has never vanished. The difference now is knowledge, science, preparedness. But history offers a warning. In 1347, Europe was thriving, connected, confident, globalized. Sound familiar? Trade networks link the planet. Planes cross continents in hours. Cities are denser than ever, and disease can travel faster than any medieval ship. We have seen this in our own lifetime. Pandemics do not belong only to the past. They belong to humanity. The Black Death was not just a medieval tragedy. It was a lesson, a reminder of fragility, a demonstration of how progress and vulnerability walk side by side. It asks us a question across centuries. Are we truly prepared, or are we simply more comfortable? The people of Messina did not know what stepped off those ships. They did not understand what was happening. They only knew fear. We understand far more today, but understanding does not remove risk. It only gives us responsibility. In 1347, the world changed. Not with an explosion, not with a battle, but with breath. And sometimes the greatest turning points in history arrive quietly. In the 14th century, ships carried the plague across seas. Today, airplanes cross continents in hours. Supply chains span the globe. Cities hold millions. We are more advanced, more connected, more prepared, but also more intertwined. If a pathogen of equal lethality emerged now, would our systems absorb the shock? Or would our complexity become our weakness? The Black Death is not just a medieval tragedy. It is a mirror, and history, when it speaks, is rarely whispering.